We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. So, as Tom warned us last week, he has been moved out of house and home, and that has resulted in him recording on a laptop with a headset this week. So, we don't have his video feed. He shall be a logo this episode, and the audio quality might not be as good as his very good Audio-Technica microphone. But hey, we're still here to answer home theater and AV questions.
Yeah, I should be able to get back in the house in about a month.
Yeah.
I will not have a kitchen,
Yeah.
but I will be in the house. Right now, my home theater is like almost full to the top with furniture. And it's
Right.
like all the wooden furniture from inside the house. They have a trailer outside that they put stuff that was a little bit more durable, but the nice stuff they shoved in here. So, as predicted by me, and I mean, I've said many times on this podcast, that when we first started talking about this, like, yeah, the plumbing company says it's only going to be a couple days. I don't really think so, but the plumbing company seems to think that, and the reno guys think it's only going to be this. I guess I got to listen to them. When they said they were going to do something to my ceiling, I said this is going to spiral out of control immediately, and Tinel looked at me and said, probably. Everything else has. I'm like, yeah, but for sure this time. Like, everything else, there was a chance. I'm like, there was no doubt. So I knew because of previous experience with my skylight getting replaced in my kitchen when they did the roof, that my ceiling is not normal. So I have exposed beams,
Okay.
and it looks like drywall with like popcorn
Okay.
on it in between.
Sure.
Okay, but everything's painted white. The beams are white. Everything's white. So it's like an A-frame. I've got like one long beam that runs the length of the room, and then these other beams that are attached to the ceiling, or the ceiling attached to, so it goes over that long beam.
Okay.
So they damaged the
Oh, no.
the ceiling when they were getting the mold out of the kitchen. So once they did that, they said, "Okay, we have to refinish your kitchen because we can't fix what we fixed without fixing the rest of it. So we have to redo that. So we're going to scrape the popcorn off." And I said, "No, you're not."
Yeah.
No, you're not. Because what I knew, and they did not know, but and I didn't really tell them because it's not my job to tell them, and I didn't want them to say, "Oh, well, then we won't do anything." Is that there's not drywall up there. There's no drywall on my ceiling. What it is some sort of 3 or 4 inch thick. It's like fiberglass board, but one side of it is treated to make it hard.
Okay.
And it's what it looks like. Okay, because I mean, I can't. It is insulation.
It's insulation, right? Okay.
It's insulation, but it's got a one side that they basically blew popcorn up on and then painted it. And that's it. And it's been slowly sort of getting weirder and weirder over the years, like falling down and stuff like that. We've tried to fix it and stuff. And
so, like,
they're like, "Oh no, we're just going to."
You don't have an attic then. That's that.
Oh no.
That's the ceiling, and
that is
directly.
The ceiling.
Oh
yeah.
Wow.
So they're like, "We're just going to scrape the popcorn." And I'm like, "When you're starting that?" This was yesterday. They said we're going to start it today. So this morning I came in, there was drop cloths everywhere and nobody working. I was like, "So, how's that ceiling going?" They're like, "Yeah." So we've got some bad news. I'm like, "It's not bad news for me." They go, "Yeah, it kind of is." So, I don't know what the insurance adjuster has to get involved here because because he's the one that said you could scrape the ceiling and redo the ceiling. So now that they've started that process, assumptions were made.
I mean, you can't put an attic in there, but you're supposed to have like baffles that allow air in through the soffits and then a proper facing over the baffles, because this is essentially it's like what you would do if you were to finish an attic into a living space. That's what should be done to your ceiling.
Right.
Apparently wasn't at the time
Was
you
not.
moved in.
Was not done. So they started working. There's like two pieces. He's like, yeah, man, I don't know what that is up there. I'm like, it's insulation. They're like, yeah, that's what it seems like. I'm like, it's insulation. I am telling you, I have seen it. I know what it is. That's why I told you guys that this ceiling thing was going to be difficult. They're like, oh
That's
yeah,
probably
so we got.
why you have all this mold. You've never had proper like ceiling sheeting venting going.
I don't know.
You probably have no roof vents. I bet you have no roof vents if it's just insulation up there, because if you did, then water would get in whenever it rains.
So, that's just what's happening.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. So now my renovation has stalled again. But that's okay,
man.
because there's an extra week built into the time frame for something like this to happen.
Oh, I'm sure 1 week will do it.
These guys are actually pretty good. The guys who are doing this stuff, they're like, the two solutions are, either this stuff is strong enough for us to just screw drywall into, and we'll just put a layer of drywall on top of it.
What?
Or we're gonna
don't do that.
And this is probably what's going to end up happening. We lose our exposed beams, so the big A-frame beam will still be there, but the exposed beams, they
make it into an attic.
They make it into like a 6-inch attic.
Yeah.
Actually, we'll fill up.
That's
with
what you need to
insulation.
do. Otherwise your roof is going to rot.
Yeah. So, anyways,
Oh,
that's fun. I mean, it's not the whole roof is not that. I mean, on top of the insulation part, there is plywood and stuff like that up there.
Well, yeah, but
beyond that, but it's just. It's what it is. It's what it is.
That needs to have air moving with the vent at the top of it, and the air coming in at the bottom of it and moving along the sheeting of your roof. That's how you prevent it from rotting, including heat rot, which would be a bigger problem in Florida than it would be where I live. Wow. Okay. Well, regardless, actually somewhat miraculously in light of all that, Tom is here, at least in audio form, to record a podcast. So everyone please share your appreciation for what Tom is doing to be here, because yeah,
actually,
no one
so
would exactly blame
we
you.
moved out. We had to move out,
Yeah.
so we are staying at an Airbnb that's about 10 minutes away. And so there is not enough room in that house for me to do a podcast and have people sleep or have people do school.
Yeah, sure.
So I just basically said I will drive home.
Yeah.
Now, I did drive home with my computer and a headset and no power cord. So we have 76% of my remaining battery.
Oh my goodness.
I like 4 hours, so we'll be fine, but at current consumption. So just so that we're aware, if I see it get to the red, I'm going to say, well, podcast is now
That's
over.
right.
So, all right, this is AVRant, a podcast that doesn't just discuss my ceiling. It also discusses your AV and home theater questions. To get your question answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrant podcast. Yes. YouTube.com/avrant.
That's the short one.
That's the short one. Yeah, that's where we don't allow comments because
that is true.
It goes 4chan, Reddit, and then YouTube as far as awfulness of comments that you can get. 4chan being the worst. I think there's an 8. Isn't there an 8chan that's even worse than 4chan?
Yeah. Of course, yes.
Yeah.
No. The less said, the better. I'm not going to get into that at all.
All right. Let's see. If you want to contact us directly, Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. It's very strange how just a little bit of weirdness in how I'm doing this has made me less comfortable saying those things I've said for 13 years or whatever it is.
Holographic memory, man. One thing affects another.
That's right. So I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is by going to avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, which will send you to a PayPal donation site. There you can send money from your PayPal, or you can send money from your credit card,
That's right.
which they will take. I will have no access to. So I want to thank Kevin, and I am pretty sure it was Jefferson. I'm going to look at it.
Jefferson was the abnormally large donation, if that was going by the email.
It was abnormally large.
Kevin
yes.
and Jefferson, thank you both very much for the donation. Now, Jefferson did send in a question, which, so in light of the amount that he donated, or at least told me that he donated via the email, and then when the email came in and what the contents of the email was. I emailed him back because I'm like, yeah, it's not going to make it on this week's show, but I don't want to leave you hanging. And then he also was hugely generous. So yeah, thank you very much for the financial support. But Jefferson's questions will be on next week's show.
No. Okay. All right. So we also want to thank our 122 patrons, down from 124. So close.
That's right.
To 125. Over at patreon.com. Patreon's a subscription service where you subscribe to your content creators of choice and give them some monies, and a minimum of $1, I think is what it costs over there. So our 122 patrons over at patreon.com. Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies.
For sure. That's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up, it's an automatic monthly donation, $1 per month minimum, no maximum. And yeah, thank you very much to our 122 patrons over there.
All right. Just want to get some shout out here to people who have supported us in other ways. It doesn't have to be financial. You just have to do something and let us know what you did. So Tom, not me, different Tom, tracked down a fully authorized seller of refurbished NAD products. They're called Safe and Sound HQ, and following our advice, he bought a NAD T758V3 from them, not the new V3i version. V3 lowercase I. Thank you, NAD. Thank you, NAD. Thank you.
That's the update.
Thank you. They're keeping up with the trends. They started with the lowercase i's, as everybody did like 10 years ago. So it seems right in line. Not the new V3i version, since he can live without AirPlay built in when he's saving $600. And he told them it was because of us. So they're going to be like, because of Tom? Tom said, we hate Tom. They do, dude. They totally hate me.
Well,
it's not.
I mean, Safe and Sound HQ wouldn't know you. NAD Electronics might know you.
That's true.
Safe and Sound HQ.
NAD knows me, but retailer. Safe and Sound does not.
Yeah.
That's right. Safe and Sound love you guys. You guys are the best. Don't believe any of the lies that NAD tells you about me.
Well, thank you to Tom, last initial K, not Andrew, for talking us up to them. And good to have that as a resource, because we like knowing the authorized refurbished dealers for various brands. So that's good to keep in our back pocket. Thank you.
Right. We also want to thank, and I especially want to thank Joseph, who reached out to me on Twitter to send me some good seasonings dressing packets. And I just assumed that there couldn't possibly be two people who were doing this. And when Rob put it on the notes, the list last week or whatever it was, I had no idea that it was two different people that were doing it in two different ways. So
last week
thank you, Joseph.
Was it Dan or Don last week? A D something, 3-letter with an N. I'm forgetting the vowel in between. Sorry about that. But yes, no, Joseph this week. Joseph is the one who reached out on Twitter and was like, hey, I found some good seasons packets. Do you want some, Tom?
He did. He sent me pictures, too. There's oodles of them, and I have looked in my stores, and they're still not there. I basically said to both people, no, for right now, since I'm no kitchen and everything else, yeah, we can live without it for this time being. We're in a decent place. It's about 1,000 square feet smaller than my house, which is hard to stomach, but it has enough bedrooms for everybody to break off and do their schoolwork, which is all we were really looking for. Plus, it has like the world's smallest pool. It's like a 25-foot by 10-foot pool. It's 5 feet deep at the deep end. So not very deep, but it's nice. So thank you, Joseph. We also have some notes of gratitude from Curt, who's in Florida and wants to treat Tom to lunch once this pandemic is over. Okay, Curt, that sounds great.
You've probably got 1.5 to 2 years to save up, so that should be doable.
Yeah, really. We'll go to the Mill. That's like the most expensive restaurant in town. I'm really bummed. One of my favorite bars, and I don't go to bars, but I've only been to this one once, but I really liked it. It was called Room 901, and it was like it was full of like books.
Okay.
They used books for everything. But it was like one of the quietest, nicest places, because it was like
it provided diffusion and a little absorption.
Diffusion everywhere, nice. Dude. I was like, oh, I love this
place.
Probably
inadvertent, but it worked.
Yeah. So, Curt, I look forward to that, and RD, who also sent a note of gratitude. So thank you, Curt, and thank you, RD.
Yes, for sure. Curt and RD, thank you very much for the notes of gratitude that you sent. We do appreciate it. It is very nice. It is encouraging while we're keeping this thing going by hook or by crook, whatever we have to do to keep AVRant going. So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who continues to listen and send in your questions. It's wonderful to keep this going. And yeah, that's our listeners of the week. Thank you, everybody. Tom's staring at something.
I'm looking at the AVRant topic because we use a Google Doc for
We
this,
do.
and I just realized that you have the year, month,
Year, month, day.
month, day. I'm not used to seeing it that way.
Dude, it's
I was
been like
trying to
that
figure-
for 8 years now.
You know,
I mean, I do that so that, in Windows, it comes up in the correct order.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand, but still, I just usually I do. I do. How do I do it? I don't know. Anyway,
Well,
it doesn't matter.
Americans do month, day, year, which is very confusing because most of the world does day, month, year, which makes sense.
Yes.
Small to large.
I think that I think I started doing that when I was in Australia.
Right.
I think that's how I started doing it. All right. In the news, the Onkyo, Integra, Pioneer, and Pioneer Elite brands, which are all under one umbrella, have been bought by Klipsch's parent company, Vox. VOXX.
Mm-hmm.
It's one X away from being sexy. And the Onkyo USA is being closed immediately. They already had an agreement in place to distribute Klipsch's products through Onkyo's operations in Japan, and now all of Onkyo's products will be distributed through Klipsch's operations in the Americas. Wait, but Onkyo's being closed, so do they have products?
They do.
Or...
They still have products. They are not like completely vanishing as a company, but Vox, like there's the whole thing. They set up like a new company, like basically a shell company to be the owners of Onkyo, Integra, Pioneer, but it's all under the umbrella company of Vox, who also owns Klipsch and Acoustic Research and RCA. There was another big speaker brand that they own as well. So yeah, I guess there was news like a couple of years ago where Onkyo was looking to sell to Sound United, but that deal fell through. So now they have found another buyer in the form of Vox.
All right. This comes from Andrew. NVIDIA released their new Shield Experience Upgrade 8.2 for Shield TV devices going back as far as 2015. There were a number of patches and fixes, particularly on the audio side, for various issues that users have reported. But the most notable features are, for older 2015 and 17 Shield TV devices, the match frame rate beta option has now been added.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. For 2019 Shield TV models, they've added HDR to SDR conversion, and the AI upscaler now works all the way up to the 60 frames per second content.
Yeah, so the HDR to SDR conversion is kind of significant if you are... Well, I mean, a lot of people have two displays who are running into this issue, right? Where they have one display that's HDR, but when they switch to their other display, they need something that can convert from HDR to SDR. The Shield didn't used to do that. Now it does. So that's kind of a cool feature to have added via basically a firmware update. Yeah, the match frame rate option still does not work flawlessly, but it is literally a button press try, so you can give it a try, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't, well, then you go back to manually switching the frame rate if you really want to. So now older Shield model owners can give that a try.
All right. The release of Mulan on Disney Plus continues to appear as though Disney is kind of making up the rules as it goes along. For a brief time, if you search for Mulan Disney Plus, a poster for the live-action version would appear with Premiere Access across the top. If you clicked on that to go to the splash page, the text at the bottom said, "Watch before it's released to all Disney Plus subscribers on December 4th, 2020. So pay $30 now or just wait 3 months."
Mm-hmm.
But if you look now, they've removed the December 4th date. So
they probably decided maybe that's not a long enough window to encourage people to pay the $30.
I think that they think they're still going to release it on the 4th.
December
They just
4th?
don't want people to.
They don't want people to know.
Well, to do the math.
I mean, if that had been a theatrical release, so I mean, originally it was supposed to come out in what was it, like May? I think it was supposed to originally come out in theaters in May. So I guess if it had come out on Disney Plus December 4th, I mean, that still would have been fast to go from theaters to a streaming service, like not premium video on demand. That might have been within that window, but to actually show up on Disney Plus that short, even if it had come out in theaters in May. So now that the theatrical release has been delayed, and now for all intents and purposes canceled in favor of their premier access on Disney Plus, to have the regular Disney Plus release only 3 months later, wow, that's... I don't know how much you're getting for your $30, but there you go.
Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, it doesn't seem like there's going to be any movies that are going to drag me back to the theaters. So, between the terrible reviews of Tenet I've read and the terrible reviews of New Mutants that I've read, I'm like,
Eh,
okay, well,
not yet.
yeah, I can't wait
Maybe
for them to come out
Bond,
on the streaming
Bond in
service.
November, or Black Widow if that comes out.
I'm still not going to the theater for about Black Widow. Okay, that's just not happening. All right, breaking news. NVIDIA has officially announced their new RTX 30 series of graphic cards. The RTX 3070, the 3080, and the 3090 are the first GPUs to include HDMI 2.1 outputs, along with 3 DisplayPort 1.4 outputs, plus onboard AV1 decoding and NVIDIA's second-generation ray tracing. Ooh, ray tracing.
Mm-hmm.
The first model available will be the 3080 on September 17th for $700. The flagship 3090 launched September 24th for $1,500, and the 3070 will follow sometime in October for $500 after everybody has already bought the more expensive ones.
Mm-hmm.
So while they're all technically capable of 8K 60 output or 4K up to 240 frames per second, the informal understanding is that the 3070 is for 4K 60, the 3080 is for 4K 120, and the 3090 is for 8K. Naturally, as games progress, that will change, but the entry 3070 model is being touted as slightly more powerful than the former 2080 Ti flagship, while the 3080 is twice as powerful and 3090 is a whole new class with a whopping 24 gigabytes of onboard memory and taking up 3 PCI slots.
Yeah.
So all you guys can marvel at the pictures of these as you cannot buy them since they will be taken up by all the Bitcoin miners.
Yeah.
Is that still a thing?
Oh,
Does that still happen?
It's still a thing, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, that's $1,500 for that new flagship. You better really want that 8K. But I mean, pretty clearly, it looks like they're targeting the 3080 to be the most popular model. They know the $700 price point. That's a lot of money for a GPU, but it's not out of reach for PC gamers. And then 4K 120 is going to be, or 4K 144, as a lot of gamers want. That's going to be more common than 8K, of course. So that seems to be the value model, if you want to call it that. The 3070 though, I mean that's pretty compelling. $500 is not crazy unreasonable for something that can do 4K resolution at a solid 60 frames per second for a lot of today's games, and then also would be a very good choice for VR headsets. So yeah, but the thing for home theater fans, these are, HDMI 2.1 devices. So along with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, these are the other HDMI 2.1 devices that might be connected to your new 4K TV.
Yes, because home theater HD PCs are such a thing these days.
Yeah. Some people do like to game on their big screen, though. So.
Yeah, I guess. I'll tell you, man. The worst part of living in an Airbnb is the freaking TVs.
Uh-huh.
It is just atrocious. It's so bad.
It's a good reminder, though. You got to see how the other well more than half lives.
I mean, this one is not so bad. Now, they don't have any speakers or anything. Blah, blah, that's fine. Not you. And it's fine that in that the color and everything is not atrociously bad.
Okay.
The settings seem to be okay. It's just, how do you sit 15 feet away from like a 50-inch screen? Yep. It's just, I can't read anything that's on the screen. I can't see anything. It's all small. It's very distracting. All right, RD solved one of those gremlin type problems, so he wanted to share his experience in case it has happened to anybody else. He is using a Vizio P series TV along with a Denon X4600H and an Apple TV 4K. He was getting the issue where about 30 minutes into watching something on his Apple TV 4K, the screen would go black and the audio would cut out. It would come back after a few seconds, but obviously that was annoying. He tried a factory reset, new HDMI cables, but nothing changed. So then he decided to watch the front panel of his Denon, and sure enough, a little light on the front panel blinked off just when the audio and video interruption happened. It turned out he had set things up to have a Zone 2 on by default because he sometimes uses the Zone 2 pre-outs to feed his wireless headphones. But Denon has an eco setting. And after 30 minutes of inactivity in Zone 2, it was automatically turning Zone 2 off, which apparently resulted in the whole new HDMI handshake. So check your eco or green or power saving settings. That's right.
Yep.
Saving power doesn't ever do anything good. Just remember that. There's no benefit in your home theater for using a power setting.
The
Saving
eco
settings.
setting, the power saving setting. I mean, certainly Lee will tell you that on if you have an OLED, the first thing you want to do is turn off any of the power saving settings because it completely destroys your image if that's turned on. So yes, good tip. I like that. And yeah, it was one of those like, why is this happening? Couldn't find anything in normal settings. Wasn't the HDMI cables. It was the eco. So there you go. Good thing to check. Thank you.
Yeah. And let's all thank the HDMI group once again for having such a flawless connection that benefits everybody and has no way ever been linked to any sort of problems with anything. And we can all remember back to all the heartache that we had with component video cables and how terrible they were to plug 3 things in that worked all the dang time and were cheap.
HDMI is pretty cheap now.
It's not that cheap. It's not compared to component video cables. It's not. All right, Jim. Jim heard us mention some small subwoofer options for a kitchen setup, so he wanted to share what he did. He got a 10-inch Dayton SUB-1000, painted it white, and redid the front grille with white speaker grill cloth. And to feed it a signal, his Vizio can use its stereo analog output at the same time as its built-in speaker. So he made use of the subwoofer's low-pass filter, and he used a UMIC 1 in Room EQ Wizard to tune his TV's EQ settings. He's amazed at how much better the TV's built-in speakers sound after the addition of a subwoofer, plus some measurement and EQ. And like a lot of people, he probably spends more time in his kitchen than he does in his theater. That is not true for me, and I spend that awful lot of time in my kitchen. This is very nicely done.
It is.
It looks very nice.
It's cute. I do like that white finish blending into the wainscoting around the bottom of his theater there, and yeah, looks slick. I like it.
All right, let's get to some questions here. We got Bob in the Philippines. Bob is concerned that he's asking a trivial question. It is trivial, Bob. We're going to skip it. Next question.
In all seriousness, please, nobody ever worry about what the question is. Just go ahead and ask. We don't care if it's been asked before. We don't care if it's something we don't know how to answer. We'll tell you that too. Ask away. We take all questions.
All right, fine. This is something he has found mildly bothersome. He wants to know if there's any way to change it. He uses a Denon X4200W receiver, and he has it set to power a 5.1 system in his theater and to power zone 2 in his kitchen. He has noticed that when he changes the volume in the main zone, it goes up or down by half decimal increments. But when he changes the volume for zone 2, it goes up or down by whole numbers. Is there any way to change that? Whole numbers. No.
Nope.
It can't be.
There's no way I'm aware of to make any change to that. I'd never noticed that because I don't use Zone 2 on my Marantz, so I've never made a note of it.
I've only used Zone 2 a couple of times in my life, and every time I have, Zone 2 volume control is never done when I'm looking at the receiver. It's always done like outside where the Zone 2 usually is. And it never occurred to me. So the question I have for you, Bob, and I understand that this is troublesome or at least irksome that it's not as fine-tuned as the other one. Is it an actual problem, or is it just something that bugs you?
I think it's a just bugs him thing. Because, I mean, on a technical level, 1 decibel by definition is meant to be the least noticeable amount of change in the human auditory system. Now, I mean, it's not perfect because it's just based on a logarithmic scale, and our hearing isn't exactly logarithmic, but it's very close to it. So, by definition, 1 decibel is meant to be the least noticeable change. So, and the thing is, I don't actually know if he wants Zone 2 to go up by halves or if he wants the main zone to go up by whole numbers, just so that they match. I would assume he wants the more granular control. But I do think this is more just it's a display. It's like visually irksome that they're different from each other. But there's no like setting you can just do inside the AV receiver or something like that to change it. I don't know why it's like that.
Right. The only thing I was thinking is that if it was... You know how you can set it to do the reference volume, just volume display versus the, I don't know what they call that other one because I've never used it.
Relative volume, I think. Oh no,
Yeah.
no, wait. Relative is relative to. So I thought it would be the
Reference.
absolute scale, the absolute volume scale.
So the only thing I was thinking was that if each zone had its own, I would check that. I guess is the only thing, but I don't think that that's the case. I wouldn't.
Think it is, and I don't think it makes a difference to whether it goes up by halves or wholes.
Right.
So. No, I'm not aware of a simple setting that you can change. But yeah, I mean, this is a Denon. You could go into what would be the audio menu within the settings. There is a volume subsection within the audio part of the menu where you can choose whether the display of the volume is in reference to reference volume with mostly negative numbers, or the absolute scale where it starts at 0 and goes up from there. But as far as I know, it doesn't do anything to change what happens in zone 2. So yeah. Sorry, Bob, but try not to look at your AV receiver while changing the Zone 2 volume, and then you will never know.
Right. Everett asks, is there a particular reason why we don't ever seem to suggest Anthem receivers when anybody asks? Is it just price? Is it just that we don't like the room correction? Or is there some sort of performance or quality issue? He's just curious. I mean, I don't know that I've ever thought of Anthem receivers as being competitive with any of the other stuff that we recommend. It's the same, right? I mean, we've been recommending Denon and Marantz for how long? What, like the last 5 years straight, pretty much?
Something like that, something close to that. Yeah. Prior to that, we recommended a lot of Yamahas and Onkyos.
Right.
Oh.
And starting this year, for at least the remainder of this year, we're going to be suggesting a lot of Yamahas again because of the feature set. The fact that they've got HDMI 2.1 switching, which the Denons and the Marantzes don't.
That's right.
So when Anthem shows us something that suggests that its price is their prices and their move set is, and the move set, they're the Mortal Kombat characters, when their prices and their feature set are in any way competitive with somebody else, with these other people that we're talking about, then we will suggest them.
I mean, I think
until then they get left out.
It's fair to say that the feature set. So I mean, they haven't announced any models with HDMI 2.1 yet, but that is still very new. So prior to that becoming a thing in the recent past, the feature set was pretty comparable, but the feature set at the price point was the consideration. So it did definitely have something to do with price. Now, I mean, this is one of those instances where if somebody has an Anthem receiver, I'm like, you got a very good receiver. Like the processing
is... What do they use for room correction over there?
Well, it's Anthem room correction, which uses the initialism ARC, unfortunately. Right. But it's not audio return channel. It was around before as Anthem room correction, and they actually did just a couple of 3 years ago, I can't forget exactly now, but they did a big update to it that added quite a bit more features, gave it a lot more manual control than it already had. So I mean, it's right up there with the other room correction systems. So it's none of those things. It's more just a matter of, we always tend to look for the maximum feature set at the lowest price. That's what we pretty much tend to recommend, and Anthem can be competitive in the feature set, but their prices tend to be a bit higher. And then for something like, somebody specifically wants Dirac, well, they don't use Dirac, so it's a matter of the combination of the questions that come in and then trying to hit feature set at lowest price. But for sure, if you were to get an Anthem receiver, and at the moment you don't need HDMI 2.1, by no means are we saying that was a bad choice or anything like that. Very good performers. Anthem room correction is good. The feature set other than HDMI 2.1 is solid, so it was just a matter of price.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, $3,400 for a receiver is a little...
Right.
Their cheapest receiver is what? I just pressed back and it's not doing anything, so I won't know forever.
I think it's like $2,200 or something like that. Something in
No, the cheapest one is $1,400.
Oh, okay.
Their MRX 520.
Oh, but that's a 5-channel model, right?
Yeah, it's a 5.2.
Yeah.
The 11.2 is $2,500.
There you go. That's the one I was thinking of.
$3,500 for the other 11.2. Yeah, and at that price point, I just don't even consider it a contender, because if you bought one for whatever reason, like Rob said, it's not like you got a bad thing.
No.
It's just that I would have recommended you save money, but if that's what you wanted and you're happy with it, then go with God, as I like to say sometimes. Dan has a JVC X790 projector. That was the final 1080p Wobble K model before the genuine 4K model lineup. He uses Xbox One X and the older NVidia Shield from 2017 as his sources. You just got to update, buddy. Make sure you got it.
That's right.
Would it be worth getting the newer 2019 NVIDIA Shield? He's mostly wondering about its AI upscaling and tone mapping of HDR. He's read really good things about the AI upscaling, but at the same time, it isn't applied to any 4K content. And when he tried an experiment with this X790, he thought that the 1080p content looked best if he turned off JVC's Wobble K processing and just let it show 1080p as 1080p.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to look best? Keep things exactly the way they are, or have a 2019 Shield AI upscale 1080p to content to 4K and then use Wobble K on his JVC to show it? Rob will probably have a very specific, my general life belief when it comes to these things is let it display the thing in the aspect that it displays
as close to the native source as possible.
Right. So, if the thing that you're doing is 4K, then you would use the wobble, whatever it is,
sure.
to get to the 4K. But if your panel is a 1080p panel, and you have the option of just showing 1080p as 1080p, I would probably go with that. But that's just that would be my knee jerk. Just setting up this projector, how do you want it set up? That's the way I would have it set up. And then I would experiment to see, like you have, experiment to see how I liked it when the projector did the upscaling to 4K.
Yeah. This is a opinion bit on my end, but similar to, you remember the old Dolby video processors? The
vaguely, yeah.
Which, a lot of people were fans of those, and then I would look at it and I go, there's a lot of instances where what it's doing, subjectively looks good, but every once in a while there's an artifact that gets thrown in there, and the image goes a little wonky, or it's, noticeable edge enhancement or something like that. And for that reason alone, I was like, I don't want it. I don't need it. I don't want it. And I was never a big fan of Dolby. And this AI upscaling that the 2019 NVIDIA Shield devices offers is a similar case, in my opinion. A lot of the time, subjectively, it does look nice. It does make 1080p images look sharper on a 4K display. It is applying edge enhancement by and large. That's what it's doing, but it's a more advanced version of it. It isn't just, like a uniform, we put ringing around every object to make it stand out. This is more advanced processing that's going on, but every once in a while, there's a weird little artifact that crops up, and I'm like, I don't need it. I don't want it. So my opinion is that I would keep things the way you have it. When it's 1080p, I'd turn Wobble K off on the JVC and just watch 1080p dot for dot as 1080p. And when it's a genuine 4K source, the AI upscaling wouldn't be applied anyway, and you can watch it with the Wobble K turned on. That's my take. Plus, it saves you money, so, where's the downside?
Yes, what's the best way to handle HDR tone mapping? In his case, this X790 does not have dynamic frame-by-frame tone mapping. Only the genuine 4K models have that. But he has had it professionally calibrated. Would this 2019 Shield do anything on the tone mapping front? Is there anything he could change to provide a benefit? I don't know.
So,
Rob?
So no, on the tone mapping front, the NVIDIA Shield isn't doing anything in the way of tone mapping HDR. If it is an HDR content source that you're playing through your NVIDIA Shield, regardless of the year, then that's just being output as the content source sent it, through the internet to your Shield, or off of your hard drive through the Shield. The Shield is not doing any tone mapping to the signal. So you're relying on the tone mapping that's being done by your JVC, regardless of which model year of the Shield that you have. So, I'm trying to figure out what it was that he thought it might do. I mean, the only players that apply some sort of tone mapping to the content that they're playing are Panasonic's Ultra HD Blu-ray players, but even that is not frame by frame tone mapping. That is just taking what might be 4,000 or 10,000 nit content and mapping it down to 1,000 or 500, whatever you choose in the Panasonic, and keeping it consistent that way. So the Shield doesn't have anything like that for HDR content. And yeah, the best way to handle it is if you've had it professionally calibrated. I'm assuming you had an HDR calibration done as well as an SDR calibration. The JVCs were very good at 1,000 nit content, and I'm not aware of any streaming content that's been made at anything other than 1,000 nits to this point. That seems to be what all the streaming providers are using, and so your JVC should already do a very nice job of tone mapping that.
Okay. Ken on Facebook. Any experience to share with putting a ductless mini split AC unit into a home theater? I have no experience with having that in a home theater, but I have had that in a house. My parents are now up to 3 air conditioners in their house.
Okay.
Because my brother is autistic, and his room has to be I mean, you can almost see your breath in there. He has to have it very cold for whatever reason. It's what he likes, so it's worth the money to have an AC for him in his room.
Okay.
So it's also very nice when I am very hot
Right.
and I go over to their house back before COVID. I go over to their house and I go and like I'm gonna go in my brother's room and just stand there. Like this, you can see the steam coming off your arms. It's very nice. But they just installed a second one in their exercise room, and it sounds like they have a massive house. They have a very small house.
Okay. Now, when you say 3 air conditioning units, do you mean 3 actual compressors that live outside?
No, they have a whole house AC,
Okay.
like your normal AC.
Okay.
And they have a mini split in his room and a second mini split in the exercise room, because when he goes in that room to exercise, he wants it to be cold in that room. And he was driving them crazy because he would go and turn the AC down the whole entire house.
Right.
And while he will always remember to turn it down when he wants to go in there, he very rarely remembers to put it back. So,
and each mini split has its own compressor unit that's outside, separate from. Okay.
It's outside.
Okay, so you do have 3 compressors outside.
I would not put one in my home theater.
Ah.
I mean, it's generally not the quietest thing you've ever experienced. The newer ones are not bad. They are, quite a bit better than they have been. But you got to remember that compressor is like literally on the other side of the wall. It's not.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be. You could put the compressor somewhere outside your house and then run very long copper tubes, to and from the actual wall units. And the other thing that I've noted is that most people, when they think of a mini split AC, they're picturing the wall units that go high up on the wall, and that's where the fan is, and then the coolant is cycled through the copper piping that goes to the compressor that's outside. But there are ceiling units for mini split systems that tend to be a little bit quieter than the wall-mounted units. So
I have a feeling this is going to end up getting pretty prohibitively expensive, but
the other thing is actually there's the YouTube channel Linus Tech Tips, and he took on the project of quote unquote DIY installing his own mini split system, which he has a friend who's a licensed electrician and who basically helped him out for, bottles of beer. It's not quite what everybody has in their back pocket. So calling it DIY is not really fair. But on top of that, all the professional AC installers in the comments who are like, yeah, what you did'll function. It's like, that's not the right way of installing a mini split AC system, not really properly. So it's something that it looks like you would be able to DIY, but to do it properly, you really probably should hire a professional. And depending on the length of the run, the amount of labor installed could be significant. So I think because the marketing is always that mini split systems are quieter. I guess they're quieter than a literal window unit, right?
I think that's what the yardstick they're using to measure this by is the window unit. I used to have in one of our first apartments in Los Angeles when my wife and I got married, we had a swamp cooler unit in our bedroom. And you want to talk about loud. I think it's loud. But from that point on, my wife has not been able to sleep without some sort of noisemaker in the
White
room.
noise, yeah.
That it was like a perfect white noise
Yeah.
generator for her. Like Rob said, there's probably some way to do this where it is, certainly pretty quiet. I mean, I think that it's going to get kind of out of control kind of fast if you're, trying to explain to your AC guy why the compressor unit needs to be, on the other side of the house, and
Right.
he's got to run all these tubes and everything else.
Abnormally far away.
Yeah. And even then, I mean, a lot of those the split units on the inside too, they have a motor or something
Yeah.
in there.
Well, they have a fan at the very least.
They got the fan, and then a lot of times it'll rotate up and down. I mean, I'm sure you can
Right.
change that, but it's not silent. It will not be silent.
Like I say,
I mean,
a lot of people overlook the ceiling outlet instead of the wall mounted outlet. The ceiling outlet does tend to be a bit quieter, but not every installation can accommodate the ceiling mounted unit. I mean, the ceiling mounted unit is difficult to install in between floors. So if this is like a lower floor theater that you're trying to install it in, very often that isn't going to work. It pretty much has to be an attic. It doesn't have to be an attic space, but that's where it was basically intended for the ceiling type units with the mini splits. And then you got to run the copper tubing to them as well. So, yeah. I mean, I'm assuming the idea is home theater's too hot. I need AC and I want it to be quiet. I'm assuming that's sort of the take that Ken is looking for. Obviously, installing an entire whole house HVAC system that goes through your duct, existing duct work is more expensive than mini split. But mini split, I mean, it tends to be like a $15,000 to $20,000 installation for a single room to have it professionally done correctly.
Yeah, you can get it cheaper than that.
You certainly can.
It is quite a bit. Now that I do want to say, if the option is have a little noise in your home theater or roast,
right?
I will take the have a little noise in my home theater
yeah.
over roasting every single time. So, we are not saying don't do it. We're saying don't expect it to be silent. I don't believe the hype. It's not going to be silent. It is going to create noise. But I have a ceiling fan in my home theater.
Sure.
It is old and it is not quiet. And most of the time, I never notice it. I get used to that sort of, low hum in the background. It's on right now. I don't know if my mic is picking it up, but I know I won't be taking it out, the sound out. So, if the option is, no one wants to stay in here for longer than an hour because it gets too hot in here, or I put a mini split in, you put the mini split in.
Right.
All right, Kurt, we've mentioned how Sony's Ultra HD Blu-ray players require you to manually turn Dolby Vision on and off. So what happens if you're watching an HDR10 disc and you've left Dolby Vision on? Oh, dude, it's like the formats start fighting with each other, and then everybody dies. It's just terrible.
Well, nothing quite that dramatic. But no, so what the Sony player will do is apply a Dolby Vision flag to the signal, so that will kick your display into Dolby Vision mode. So it will still say Dolby Vision, even though there is no Dolby Vision on the disc. Now that in and of itself, of course, is not the end of the world, but what is going to happen to the image? So if it were a Dolby Vision signal, then the metadata attached to each scene or possibly each frame is going to change, because that's the whole point of Dolby Vision. It's dynamically adjusting the tone mapping scene by scene or frame by frame, and therefore your TV can adjust its light output and its average light level for the picture that's being shown to show you as much detail as it possibly can within the amount of light that your display is able to produce, and it will maximize how much light it can put on there while retaining as much detail as possible. If you were to picture what an HDR10 signal is, it's a single piece of metadata that informs the display of the brightest single pixel in the entire movie, plus the average picture level of the entire movie. So essentially, that is the metadata that your television will now be acting on. Instead of scene by scene, it's saying, okay, this scene, the average light level is 80 nits and the brightest pixel on screen is 300. And so your display goes, okay, I can show all of that. I don't have to do anything. I can show the signal as is. That could be the case in Dolby Vision, whereas in HDR10, that very same scene is going to have attached to it the metadata for the brightest pixel in the entire movie. Let's say it's 1500 nits and your display is an OLED, it can only do 700. So it is going to dim the image down when it doesn't have to, right? It's going to tone map the image down because it says, hey, as far as I know, the brightest pixel on screen right now is 1500 nits and I can't do that. And the average picture level right now is whatever, 100 nits, but it isn't really. It's actually 80, but the display doesn't know that. That's what the metadata is telling it. So by and large, the most noticeable thing is that everything is probably going to look dimmer than it should and dimmer than it has to. If Dolby Vision were there, the display could make certainly certain scenes, certain individual frames brighter because those frames would fall within the capabilities of the display. But it doesn't know that when all it has to work on is the HDR10 metadata. So just imagine that somebody released an actual Dolby Vision disc, but they never changed the metadata. The only metadata they ever sent was the brightest possible thing in the entire movie. That is, in effect, what is happening there, so everything will probably get dimmed more than it should.
There you go. So, take your risks. Andrew says, for several years now, he's been using SVS's SoundPath wireless adapters to send the LFE signal to his bass shakers, and they've worked great. He recently moved, and running speaker wire to his surrounds would be difficult, so he bought another set of the wireless adapters for those, but he's getting intermittent popping sounds, and when he called SVS for help, the only thing they could suggest was to make sure the adapters are physically distant from any other wireless devices, so he's tried a few different locations, but there's been no improvement. He's using the small Fosse Audio Class D amp to power his surrounds, and he's also tried it with an older Dayton Class D amp, and he's tried adjusting the trim levels in his Denon X4400 receiver. Any suggestions? Popping sounds. It sounds like interference. That's what SVS is suggesting as well. It sounds like interference. Is it at the end of their... even if it wasn't at the end of there, is there, obstructions in their way? Are they extremely far away from the adapters? Is there a microwave anywhere in the house that is being operated at any given time? It just might seem like. I guess my suggestion would be to try a different solution here rather than SVS.
The SVS, the SoundPath wireless adapters, they're, as far as I can tell, just a rebadge of the Daytons. That's certainly what they appear to be to me, and that wouldn't be super shocking. Some of other SVS's other products are rebadges of other OEM products. So I would just point you to my favorite wireless adapters, which are Outlaws. OAW4 is the model number now. I like the form factor better, for one thing, because it doesn't have the weird little USB adapters for the power. But more than that, it has multiple different frequency settings that you can change, plus frequency hopping if it detects any interference. For my experience, these are the best wireless adapters that I've used, although I was using an older version of it, but hopefully it hasn't gotten worse with the OAW4 version. They do go for $130 for the transmitter and receiver couple that goes together with the Outlaws, which is only $10 more than what SVS is charging for the SoundPaths. So I'd give it a shot. If nothing else, you can manually change which frequency it's using. So if this is just a matter of radio frequency interference, it gives you more options than what the SoundPath has.
So Andrew noticed the complete series of Game of Thrones is scheduled to come out on Ultra HD Blu-ray on November 3rd. Just looking at the packaging for the box set, he didn't see any mention of HDR. Is it safe to assume it will have it? And if he already subscribes to HBO Max, will it be worth it to have the Ultra HD Blu-ray versions? I've never seen the final season of that series, and I'm thinking that I probably don't want to, because it is like literally the only TV thing I've ever heard of,
right,
that went from being the most talked about, most popular show,
yep,
to having a season come out and everybody went, well, F that. Just like, that is dead to me. And just walked away
I
from it.
mean,
I was like,
Lost was a little bit that way, but there were a lot of people who
yeah.
had sort of nope outed of Lost before the final season even happened. So, yeah, Game of Thrones was even more of an extreme of this is the greatest show ever to this is not good. I haven't seen it. I haven't watched the whole series. I haven't even finished season 1 of Game of Thrones. Which I'll who knows? One day, if I live to be 380 years old and no more content ever gets made, I might catch up on my backlog.
Well, just knowing that you'll either never watch the final season or that you'll watch the final season and hate it as much as everybody else. You know what pisses me off more than anything is thinking that there's going to be a episode that is stupidly dark,
right?
because that happened in
That
that
did
last
happen,
season
yeah.
too. And I would want to know if they fixed that more than I want to know about HDR. Did they fix that episode so that it's not dumb? Because I think that would anger me more than almost anything else.
Well, to answer his first question first, according to Blu-ray.com, who of course tracks all the physical disc releases very nicely, the box set of the complete series on Ultra HD Blu-ray will have HDR, and not just HDR, Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. And that would make sense because the prior individual seasons that were released, not the full box set, but just one season at a time, they all had Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. So I wouldn't anticipate that somehow the complete series set would magically not have it at this point. So going by all of that, I would expect that it has Dolby Vision on the Ultra HD Blu-ray discs. Now, whether that'll be worth it versus the version on HBO Max. So, I mean, at the moment, HBO Max is not offering 4K or HDR or Atmos. So certainly at this moment, the versions that are on the Ultra HD Blu-rays are superior, unquestionably. Will it always be that way? I don't think so. I anticipate HBO Max will add 4K and HDR and Atmos at some point in the future, but I don't know when. So yeah, if you're going to watch this soon, I mean, it's coming out November 3rd, so it's not immediately, but soon, and you want the very best quality, then yeah, that is the best quality that'll be available, is the Ultra HD Blu-ray. I can't tell you if you'll personally think it worth it, but there you go.
We got another Andrew, or am I going cross-eyed
It is
here?
another Andrew, a different last name, so there can be
different
more than
Andrew. There can be only one.
That's right.
So you two fight to the death, and we'll see
who's the real
name.
Andrew.
Oh my god! I watched that movie the other day with my son, and it was
what, Highlander?
Highlander.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I mean, I like that movie, and I still like it, but it didn't age super well.
Oh, I still enjoy it.
It's so very 80s. I feel the same way about the Terminator. It's like,
The first Terminator,
hey,
yep.
we're running from this murderous robot. We're hiding in a sewer. Let's have sex. Why? What? Why?
Because you had to for the plot.
Because you had to because if not, guys would go see it or whatever. I don't know what they thought. Andrew, different Andrew, is considering a speaker upgrade. His current setup is all Paradigm Monitor V5s, along with an SVS PB1000. There's your problem right there. You only got one of them. Ever since he had his first speaker setup, he's always had towers for the front, left, and right, but now he's considering bookshelves. He knows Tom recently made the switch from towers to bookshelves, and he regrets. Not a one. Zero regrets. It's not about it. I used to think, and you probably think this as well, but I used to think that tower speakers would, it's like having a bookshelf, but with having more stuff that just in case,
Okay.
It was there. I used to think that tower speakers, and a bookshelf, it would just be a bookshelf, but better.
Okay.
That sort of thing. That was my thought process. What I have discovered through my long years in this industry is that sometimes, and I would say many times, that bookshelf speaker in the right room, in a specific room, or in my case, in my room, a bookshelf speaker next to a tower speaker, so the bookshelf speaker sounds better simply because you can more accurately place it and more accurately adjust the height of it using a stand based on your own couch and where you actually sit. And at least in my case, I really felt like the bookshelf speakers sound better in here. They just do, and I think it's a matter of the form of it, more than anything else. It's just the tweeter on the Aperion Veris Grants that I had was just a little bit higher, and then maybe the dispersion was a little bit different, and then I never really got them in this room. Now I didn't have problems with them in the other rooms that I was in, but in this room I had problems getting them to really image as perfectly as I wanted them to, and the bookshelf speakers, the Ultras from SVS have been a real joy. But aside from all of that, so that was my personal experience. The reality is you should choose your speakers not based on whether or not you think a bookshelf is better or a tower is better, but your room size and where you're sitting. That's the only thing that really makes any difference, because as far as the speaker manufacturers are concerned, the bookshelves within the same line as the towers should sound identical except for how loud they can get and how low they can get. That should be the goal. They shouldn't have the bookshelves and like this. We're going to make this bookshelf so it doesn't have as high of this extension as the tower. Like, that's not the thing that they do. I don't think that's a thing that they do. They try to extend the bass in the towers over the bookshelves because they can, but they're not looking for a different sound signature within that same line. So you do not pick the towers because you think they're going to be a better performer when you have a PV1000 in your room. You pick the towers because you want to make sure that, because they're very far away from you in a very large room, they are going to be able to cross over well into your subwoofer.
Right.
And that's the only thing you really care about. So you pick the speakers based on the speaker type and size based on the room, not based on whatever other considerations AVS Forum has come up with.
Yeah, there's sort of two things that I would look at most fundamentally for deciding whether or not towers would be the appropriate choice. So one is just your distance as the listener from the speakers. If you are, certainly if you're within 12 feet, then any reasonable bookshelf is going to be able to reach full reference volume at that distance. Most will be fine out to 15 feet. The standard sort of 4 meters is what you think of. Will almost certainly be fine for almost any reasonable bookshelf speaker. Might not be the case for a tiny little satellite that some people are using. You might need to be closer than that to reach full reference volume with a itty-bitty little satellite speaker, but bookshelf speaker, 12 to 15 feet, you're probably safe. Now, a lot of people are genuinely sitting farther away than that. And at that point, you might want to start considering a towers just for sheer output capability. But outside of that, I would consider this a lesser concern, but it's still in there, which is that even if you are sitting, let's say, somewhere in the 12 to 15 foot range, listener from speaker, but you have a wide open room, there is the crossover region between your subwoofers and your speakers, which is definitely bass. We're talking the 80 to 160 hertz range is where both of them are definitely going to be playing. That is most definitely bass. It is affected by your room size, and you can end up in some situations. We've talked to people, these wide open great rooms that are 2 stories high and 17,000 cubic feet that they're dealing with, and in there a bookshelf speaker trying to reproduce 80 to 160 hertz might struggle in that range, regardless of how close you're sitting to it, because that's bass that's going well past you before you've heard one full cycle. So you can look at that and say, okay, because of just the sheer volume of air in my room, it would make more sense to use a tower speaker in here, regardless of the distance I'm sitting from it, even with subwoofers involved. So those two things. Now, what I recall of Andrew's room, I might have the picture wrong, but his seating distance is not so great that you need towers just for sheer output. And as I recall his room, it's not a completely enclosed rectangle. It is open to like a hallway space, that type of thing. But I don't recall him dealing with some massive volume of air. So the odds that Andrew genuinely needs towers in any way is really, really low in my opinion. And for the rest of the frequency range, you definitely don't need towers over the bookshelves.
All right, he was thinking he might upgrade from his Paradigm Monitor V5 speakers to the current Paradigm Premier series from entry to flagship. Paradigm's current lineup goes Monitor Monitor SE, Premier, Prestige, and Persona. In our opinions, would that be a worthwhile upgrade? So this is a perfect example of why I think that uh, universally believing that towers are somehow inherently better than bookshelves is that not only dangerous but detrimental to many home theaters. Uh, you can afford, like, we'll just use SVS because
Sure.
their lineup is easy to remember. So they have two lines. They have their prime speakers and their ultra speakers. The prime are the entry level. The ultras are the flagship because they've only got two. So
Mm-hmm.
one's got to be entry, one's got to be flagship. There's nothing in between. So if you said to me, you know, in a normal sized room, sitting a reasonable distance away, I can afford either the prime towers or the ultra bookshelves. Which one should I get?
Mm.
There is no doubt, no choice, no hesitation in my response in that you get the ultras.
Mm.
Yeah, I know they're just a bookshelf compared to a tower, but you get the ultras. Yeah, and in this case, this is another example. Going from the monitors to the Premier series, it is, you're going up in quality, getting a better sound signature, getting better materials, getting better drivers, getting better crossover design, getting better boxes, getting better everything. And the only thing you're losing out on is bass that you're not going to use. So this is literally, it's like if somebody said to you, "I will upgrade you to first class, and all I want for you to do is to give me a high five." You be slapping that person high fives left and right. They'd get high fives all day long, and that's what this is. This is right here. You're trading non-existent bass to upgrade your sound. So yeah,
I would say, though, now this is specific to having gone from the older paradigm lineup to the current paradigm lineup.
right.
So specifically, they said, because what Tom said in a general sense, I 100% agree with, but for specifically what Paradigm has done, the current Monitor SE series is a step down. I will just say full out, a step down from the prior Monitor V5 series. They went for a lower price point. They moved all the manufacturing to China. It is less expensive parts in less expensive cabinets, and they still called it the Monitor series, but that was all done. And the Premier series in the lineup would have been like the old Studio series, but it too is a step down from what the Studio series used to be. Now, I would probably venture that the current Premier series is maybe a small step over the older Monitor series, but it's not like what the step from the old Monitor to the old Studio series used to be. The Premier kind of
Right.
goes in between those now. So if going from Monitor V5s to the current Premier, I'm like, oh, that to me it's questionable. It's questionable whether you're really going to be fully satisfied with, oh, that was a big upgrade in sound quality. I'm like, I don't know if I would be confident in telling you that that's what's going to happen. I would maybe consider some other speaker brands that are offering speakers at a very similar price point to the Paradigm Premier series, but I think
How much are those?
might be a
How
bit.
much are those?
So I
Do we know?
think you're looking at sort of like, I don't remember exactly. I think they're in the $600, $700 for bookshelf per pair range. I might be wrong about that. I always see Canadian prices, so I might be a little off in that. But I mean, if you're used to Paradigm, that's a very neutral, transparent type of sound, and a lot of the speakers that we recommend are also in that that kind of category. It might be time to venture out and try some auditions outside of just Paradigm. I would have no qualms about you bringing in a pair of Premier bookshelf speakers for an audition.
So
from
the Premier 200 bookshelf is $500 each.
Oh,
And the
each, okay.
100 Bs or whatever the bookshelf, I guess,
Uh-huh.
is $400 each.
Okay,
So
those must
slightly
be the ones
smaller one.
I was thinking of was the entries. Okay, so these are $1,000 per pair bookshelf speakers,
Yeah.
basically, is what he's looking at. There are a lot of competitors in
Yeah.
that price range
There's
at
a lot.
$1,000 per pair for bookshelves. I wouldn't just buy the... here's the thing. If you bought Paradigm Premier bookshelf speakers, I would not anticipate anyone being disappointed in them. It's not that type of thing. It's just... I wouldn't make it the only thing you listen to at $1,000 per pair. There are so many options.
This isn't the guy that has like the super great deals on Paradigm speakers, right? We had somebody who was
I don't
like that.
think so. I mean, this is Andrew, the guy who made the models for
Okay.
the Star Wars
Yeah.
models.
So Paradigm, and we've had people who have asked about paradigms, and we have recommended paradigms before, and we have said paradigms are definitely something that you should give a listen to.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we should do. But paradigms, are still and more elite, I want to say, or a custom install, or a dealer. They go through a dealer model quite a bit, and that raises prices. That's there's more people touching it before it gets to you. So when a lot of the companies that we recommend, we're recommending them just the same way as we talked about with receivers. It's a bang for your buck thing, and I can get you something that sounds like a Paradigm. And I can get you something for less than what it costs for a Paradigm.
Right.
It's gonna give you a similar sound. So if you're a brand loyalist and you want to stick with Paradigm, sure, I might just save up a little bit and go for the Prestige or the Persona or whatever.
Well, yeah,
just so that you know that
very
you're really getting
expensive.
an upgrade in the sound, because that's really what you were going for, more than anything. Because believe me, you're gonna get the Premiere and you're gonna be like, oh my god, it's so much better, I just love it, blah. And and then after 6 months you're gonna be like, they're better, I guess, but I don't know if they were $1,000 better. And that's what we want you to be able to say is, long term, not only is this thing better because I just spent money on it and I'm excited about having it, but it is actually better.
Right. Yeah. All right. So yeah, try an Audition, but I'm not like all gung ho. Yep, that's all you need to do, and don't try anything else. I would have you audition some other 1,000 per pair bookshelf speakers along with them.
Right.
Find something that really floats your boat.
That is like the price point for
right
for speakers to $1,000 a pair. It's like one of the most competitive price points that are out there. So you can definitely find something you love in that price point. Dazz. We've followed Dazz's basement home theater progression, and now that he has his projector and screen, 2 rows of seats, acoustic panels, and full Ascend acoustic speaker setup, he's swinging back around to subwoofers with an upgraded mind. His basement theater area is T-shaped. The leg of the T is on his right side with as many doors closed off as possible. He's still dealing with about 4,000 cubic feet. He's been using a pair of SVS SB-2000 subs, one at the front, one at the back, so he's thinking a pair of bigger models that would truly meet Audioholics, Bassaholics large room rating might be in order, but budget is a concern, and for where he wants to place them, they can't be any taller than 23 inches max. Well, that kills my suggestion, because I just saw something on Rhythmic's website that was like, ooh, tall, skinny things. I love them. But they're not that skinny. I mean, it's an 18-inch driver in it. So
yes.
So the HSU ULS-15 Mark II sealed subs caught his eye. On paper, their output looks like it would be very similar to a SVS SB-3000, but a pair of the ULS-15s are only $1,500, which is very attractive. Would those be a good upgrade for him, or should he be going ported and or further up the subwoofer food chain? Yeah, you're going to want to go ported here if you can.
That's the way I would lean.
I don't. When you start talking about 4,000 cubic feet, when you're at like 1,500 cubic feet, I'm like, yeah, sealed is your jam, man. But when you're at 4,000 cubic feet, you're like, well, if you want sealed, there's the JL Audio. It's only going to run you $20K, but it'll definitely crush that room. So yeah, I would definitely be looking at ported here.
Yeah, I would definitely lean ported. Now the height restriction, I'm like, don't forget that pretty much any sub you can lay it on its side, and almost
Right.
none of them are as wide as they are tall, the ones that we tend to talk about, the ported models.
Right.
So you can lay it on its side. There's no reason why you can't. And if you're talking about what's going to get you a lot of output, a lot of really deep output, down to I think 17 hertz in this case, at a very reasonable price. He said the $1,500 price point for a pair was very attractive to him. And getting like in SVS's lineup, that would be what PB 2000 Pros, and even those, I think wouldn't that's like 1,600 or something like that. I mean, it's not way out, but but PB 2000 Pros and 4,000 cubic feet. I'm like, yeah, that's okay. I don't know if it's the amount of upgrade that you might be hoping for. So HSU remains like the highest value in terms of getting just the most output for your dollar that sort of exists. And a lot of times people only look at their flagship VTF 15H, but we should not overlook the VTF 3 Mark V HP, which a pair of those is $1,550. So it's $50 more than the sealed 15-inch model. These are still a 15-inch driver. Now, the cabinet, if standing upright as you see it in the images, is more than 23 inches, but you can lay it on its side, at which point the height is not a problem. And yeah, the amount of output you're getting from a pair of VTF 3 Mark V HPs, that's going to be like, oh yeah, that's not my SB2000s anymore. And the difference in extension between the VTF 15H and the VTF 3 Mark V is 1 hertz. So the considerably larger cabinet of the 15H is to get you 1 hertz extra extension.
Well, the thing to consider too when you're laying a subwoofer on its side is now it has feet that are not on the ground.
Yes.
So you're going to have to come up and maybe pony up for the subdued or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, there's actually lots of different companies that are putting out just, anti-vibration platforms. A lot of them are, just marketed at, live stage, where you have the monitors that fire back at the performer. And it's just, it's just an anti-vibration pad. Any of those are fine. You can find them for like under $30. A lot of pro music shops will have those at pretty darn cheap prices, or you could make your own from some packing material and a piece of plywood.
So I will say I have had subwoofers like this, and I have laid them on my side on their sides before, and not these exact ones. But one thing to consider too is that what I did is I took the feet off. Now what I found out afterwards is that the holes, the threaded inserts. If you didn't have anything in there, you just added 4 ports to your sub.
They are actual
4
holes.
very small, very whistly ports. So all I did was take the little screws that hold on the feet and put them back in there just so I could plug the holes. But that is something to consider.
Okay.
If you're looking for a cleaner look when it's laying on its side, if you just take the feet off, you may be risking that. I'm sure you can ask HSU and they'll tell you, but that's just something that happened to me, and I thought
that's a good tip.
I thought I was losing my mind, to be honest with you. I was like, what is this noise?
One other nice thing about the HSU VTF3 is that VTF stands for variable tuning frequency, and they come with port plugs, and you have the option of plugging one port or both ports to actually turn it into a sealed design. So you can try all configurations if you go with that option. You can go for maximum output. You can go for maximum extension at the expense of a little bit of output headroom, or you can seal the thing up and run it as a sealed sub and give that a try as a big old 15-inch sealed sub. So all options are available to you if you go with that. I like that as a choice.
He says someone local is selling a pair of Power Sound Audio MT110 compression horn speakers for a little more than half price. Dazz doesn't really need any more speakers for his theater. He's happy with his Ascends. But he does need speakers for his living room. But the MT110s don't have the looks that he would want. But it's a deal. Can we talk him off the ledge? Yeah. Don't buy the ugly speakers with the compression horns. I mean, these things are just awful.
I mean, in the pictures, they look like a bookshelf, but that's a 10-inch woofer, and then a horn on the tweeter that's like 8 inches in diameter. They are big.
These are like, it's like, are you a DJ? People are going to ask you. Do you DJ on the side? Is that why you have these big, ugly black boxes in your living room? Do you want to be mocked by your friends and family? Is that what you're looking for? Because you could get that here for free. You don't have to.
Ah.
You don't have to buy, $500 worth of speakers or $1,000 worth of speakers to get them. So yeah, no, don't.
No, not
It's not that much of a deal.
not all
No.
deals must be taken advantage of. You don't have a place to use these speakers, so why spend? I think it was $850 or $900 or something that was being asked. Why spend that when you don't have a reasonable place to use them? That's good. You found a deal. There'll be other deals. There are other speakers and other people in the world selling used speakers, so don't worry about it. You don't have to hop on it just because it exists.
Okay, I was just clicking on your link here. I wanted to see what this,
Okay.
so I know how Darth Vader you look.
Ah.
Carl says that I mentioned that I've tried quite a few masks and found some that I prefer, and Rob mentioned that he's wearing a full respirator at work. Would we mind sharing which brand and models we've ended up with? All right, let's start with Rob since
Okay.
it's more interesting than mine. So you've got a full respirator thing here
I do.
with the Darth Vader. Is it blue like this?
It is blue. Yep. I went for 3M's 7502, which is their probably their most widely used respirator mask piece. So that's a silicone face piece that seals to your face. There is an exhaust port that goes down the bottom, so it's not really something you'd want to use in a medical setting unless you put a filter over the exhaust port, because this is not doing as much to protect someone from me as it is to protect me from them. My breath can still get out of this thing. It is a valve system, so the air can only come in through the circular ports on the sides, and it can only go out through the port that's down by my chin. And then there are, I mean, if you've ever watched someone who's done like abatement, of asbestos or worked in an attic or something, they've probably been wearing a mask very similar to this. You've probably seen the big cartridges. They're often pink on the outside with the big sort of trapezoidal shaped cartridges. Well, there are less involved cartridges that are just a particulate filter. You've probably heard the term N95 for medical masks. N refers to non-oily particles, is what it reduces at a 95% rate. That's the N95 rating. There's also R ratings, which is for oily substances, and then there's P ratings, which is for non-oily and oily particles, and these are a P100. So they filter both oily and non-oily. 100 is 99.97%, so these are the 7093C cartridge filters. They are not a gas filter. They don't have activated charcoal in them. They are just a particulate filter, but they're a little less bulky, and they're more durable, and they last longer. So that's what I'm wearing at work. It's 3M.
How long can you wear this thing before you have to change those filters? Because those
So-
filters aren't cheap.
The filters aren't super well. That's a box of 12 of them is the only way you can buy them. So it's 6 pairs. You need a pair of the filters. So there's like no real official rating on them because the filters are encased in plastic. The air can only come in through a slit that's by your face. So unless they get submerged in something or something like that, or you're in an extremely dusty environment that will actually clog the filter material inside, the rating that's been given to them is like between 3 and 6 months of use.
Okay.
So they should last a pretty long while.
Okay. So I have been using, and what happened, and this actually happened like right after a podcast one day, very early on in the pandemic when I was, trying to figure out, a good mask system for myself. I found a seller on Etsy, and we'll link this up here.
Mhm.
The name of the seller is Empress Flora, I guess. I don't know why that has to do with anything, but I searched for sport mask, and what I looked for two things. I looked for a mask that had a Velcro strap behind the neck, and because the ones that go over your ears bother me, and I don't like them.
Okay.
And I also wanted one that, was specifically for sports and, had all the bells and whistles that you would expect. So the main draw was the Velcro behind the neck. It has ear loops that you put on to lock it in place, and then it has a nose wire and a filter pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So this is they're now calling this an active commuter sport mask. They've changed the name of this thing like a dozen times, but and they've changed the pricing and they've changed how they do it. It's whatever. So they seem to be completely in stock right now, and they range from $16 down to $13 depending on the size. And they also have kid sizes, but I think you have to buy it on a different whatever. But medium medium is what my youngest child wears. He could probably go small. He's 11.
Mm-hmm.
My boys and I all wear, and my wife, we all wear a large.
Oh, okay.
Which, when they first started, they called it men's. I bought an XL one to test, and the XL one was definitely too big.
Okay.
Just felt too big. So, what's the benefit of this mask? Well, not for me. So, I have worn it when I go to the climbing gym, which it's the only place I go on the regular. It's not a supermarket. And there's all kind of safety measures in place. And on top of that, my kids are part of the climbing team.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to go on. So the climbing gym is closed 2 nights a week. And on those nights, the climbing team comes in for 2 hours, and the climbing team parents come in and they climb. So the kids get instruction and then whatever. So there's like 20, 30 kids in this massive climbing gym. There's 20 or 30 kids and about 10 adults climbing all at the same time. So it's very well deserted in there, and people are highly motivated to keep their masks on, because if they don't, their kids get thrown off the team.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that have bothered me about other masks are with climbing, if it moves at all, I can't see my feet, which means I can't.
Right.
I have to stop climbing. I can't see what to do, and breathing. And for any of you that have done any exercise for any length of time, when you first put the mask on, it's fine, but once that mask starts to get wet,
yes,
it'll usually collapse, and then as you're breathing in and out, it's sucking in and out of your mouth,
right,
and it's extremely distressing.
Yeah,
you feel like you're choking to death. This mask retains its shape. It's not firm, but it retains its shape. It's when it's all locked in place. And I have taken this into the gym multiple times. I've climbed a lot with it. And then a couple of weekends ago, a friend and I went on a 25-mile bike ride.
Yeah.
And I took the mask and wore it for all 25 of those miles. I took it off for about 3 minutes while we took a break, and I drank some Gatorade. And that was the only time I took it off, and it never lost its shape, never felt like I was restricting my breathing, and it was quite good. So these are the ones I buy are like $13.
Mm-hmm.
I have bought many of them. They say they're machine washable. They're really not. We wash them all by hands. The thing that's going to go on these things is the nose wire. The nose wire, after it gets bent a certain number of times, it'll break, and then it'll start stabbing you, and then you got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So I've bought multiple copies for everybody in my family. The kids, one child wants to wear nothing but red, so he's got 3 red ones, and my other child's got 3 blue ones. My youngest child has just one purple one, which was I ordered a medium and a large. When I first made an order, I ordered a medium and a large to see what sizes we were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife thought that the large fit her better than the medium, so we gave the medium to the youngest child, and I ordered some more larges for her. So it's this is, my fear is someday somebody's going to say, "Oh, you've been buying these masks; they don't do anything. You're completely unprotected while you're out there." It doesn't seem to be the case. I've had lots of people buy, especially in the climbing gym, because everybody's struggling with them moving around on them. There's now like, half a dozen to a dozen people that wear them because they're so good for climbing.
Oh.
Because of how they stay on. Rob's mask is, good for protecting him, not so good for protecting everybody else.
Right.
But how comfortable is wearing that for extended periods of time? Because it looks like you would come off with this extremely weird hickey all around your mouth.
Now, you do certainly, with the respirator that I'm wearing, it does leave an impression on the face because it is a tight seal. It's an airtight seal, which is the whole idea of a respirator. I mean, the mask that you're talking about, even though it does have a filter into it, it's not an airtight seal. There's a little gap, I'm sure, up by your nose. You know, it's you wouldn't be able to go into a negative pressure situation and have it be an airtight seal around your face. Whereas the one I'm wearing is that, like I say, it's a valve system. It is way more comfortable than any surgical or cloth mask that I've tried because the valve system makes it so that my breath gets out. It doesn't get hot in there. It doesn't get sweaty in there. It's really very comfortable to wear for my entire work shift, never taking it off. So the sizing on the 3M masks, the 7502 is almost the only one they make anymore. It's technically the medium, but if it's over 90% of people, there is a 7501 that's basically kid size, and a 7503, which is more or less meant for someone who has an abnormally large distance between their nose and chin. So it's for a really long face would be the 7503 large. But yeah, 7502 will fit just about anybody. So I've been very happy with it, but if you need your peripheral vision down low, it definitely blocks that off. So it wouldn't work for the situation you're describing in climbing.
Okay, Karl says he has, this is the same question. Same guy, different question. Karl has the O2 respirator as well as the full face shield MCU2P, whatever. I can't say that. It's got hyphens and
MCU2-P.
Okay. That's the official Marvel mask. Is that what that is?
No, it's been around for a while.
Sorry, it's from the Air Force.
Yes.
He would be willing to return to movie theaters while wearing either of those. What about us? If we wore a respirator, would we be willing to go back to the cinema, especially for something like IMAX that we cannot recreate at home? You bite your tongue. I can recreate IMAX at home.
Just sit a little
literally
closer.
I just have to sit a little bit closer, and I am in IMAX. I'm a very bad person for this question because Rob goes to the movies on the regular.
Mm-hmm.
For me, and I've said this many times before in the podcast, going to the movies was more of a political act. To say, I'm going to go see Black Panther so that they make more movies like Black Panther. I'm going to go see Wonder Woman so I see more movies so they make more movies like Wonder Woman. I was not going so much for my own personal enjoyment all that often. So, no, there is no force on earth that will get me to go back. And once this is all gone, and we're all vaccinated or whatever it ends up being, I'm still probably not going to go back to the movie. So,
and with the way things are going on like Disney Plus and all that, we might not have to. It might be very short waits. I would potentially consider it wearing a full face mask like that MCU2P or 3M has versions of their respirators that are the full face shield. I wouldn't even chance it with the half mask that I'm wearing or one like the O2 respirator. I wouldn't chance it with that because droplet gets in my eye. I still get the COVID. That's still an orifice. Just covering the nose and mouth isn't enough. So with the full face mask,
I'm in Florida, dude. Apparently people around here don't think your nose is an orifice either. So. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So, all right, Fred. Unfortunately, the refurbished Denon X4400H that Fred recently purchased from Accessories for Less had an obvious defect where the height 1 left and height 2 left channels were both non-functional. Accessories for Less went through some troubleshooting with him, then they decided to do an exchange. The X4400H unit that he bought was listed as last one when he placed his original order, and after his order, it was shown as out of stock. So he was a little bit surprised when Accessories for Less was able to send him another X4400H unit as an exchange. Right away, though, things did not seem right with the exchange unit. It was missing some minor accessories and not been fully reset. It had someone else's settings still active. Pretty much everything seemed to function, but there was obvious noise in the center channel in the form of a much, much higher noise floor than in the other channels, plus what sounded like clipping in the center whenever anything was playing, and the front right binding post was also physically loose. Well, that's not great. He's back in contact with the Accessories for Less and wants to give them the chance to make things right, but he would like our advice about what we think is reasonable and how he should proceed. Money's a little bit tight right now on his end, but also understands that companies like this Accessories for Less are facing challenges as well. So, does he keep exchanging? Does he try to deal with it via Denon's warranty? Does he just insist on a return and a full refund? Or should he consider a swap to a different receiver model? And if so, which models are worth considering? Well, I would definitely let Accessories for Less try to make it right before anything else, because at the end of this, Accessories for Less is either going to say, at least in my experience and the experience of the people that have dealt with them, they're either going to say, we can't do anything, we don't have any other units to give you, so here we'll give you one of these, and
Mm.
we'll just bite the bullet on it if it's one that's a little bit more expensive, or it's a comparable price, but it's a Yamaha instead of a whatever. If you don't want that, we'll just give you your money back and you can send it back to us. And I would get to that point first before I did anything else. Or they may suggest that you do what you suggested, which is to contact Denon and try to have Denon fix it. But it really sounds like I would guess that Accessories for Less will eventually figure out a way to make this right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't limit it to just the X4400H, that model and nothing else. I mean, certainly anything within the 4000 series, if it's a 4500 that it gets replaced, or the brand new 4700, I would certainly accept those. Although if they're going to request a difference in price for that, then I would say, hey, no, that the original price, if you want to upgrade me to the 4500 for the same price as what I paid for the 44, I would certainly be okay with that. I would probably be perfectly fine with an X3600 as well, or X3700 if that happens to be the one. You would be giving up Oro 3D if you did that. The X3000 series cannot do Oro 3D, but I would have no problem with that. On the Marantz side, something like the SR6014 or higher would also be totally acceptable to me. However, if you really want a front panel on your AV receiver, then the 6000 series over at Marantz does not have a full front panel. It just has the little porthole and nothing else. So that's something to be aware of there, but it would feature-wise be the same as your X4400. So any of those models, I would certainly be willing to consider a swap for the different model. I do suspect, it tends to be the case that like when a fairly recently released model starts having refurbished units available, very often those were just, customer decided they didn't want it. There's absolutely nothing that was ever wrong with it. It just went into the open box or refurbished stock. Whereas the 4400 is an old enough unit now that any refurbished models that you're coming across probably had a genuine problem, and unfortunately it sounds like you got something that was already returned once by somebody, and they sort of recycled that and sent them out. I'm not a fan of them having done that. That isn't right. It doesn't sound like it was actually I'm talking about the replacement unit. Doesn't sound like it was actually fully refurbished before it was sent to you as an exchange. I mean, it might have been refurbished once, returned by somebody, to be sold as refurbished, should be refurbished again before it's sent to you. It doesn't sound like that happened. So I'm not a big fan of that. I don't like that apparently happened to you. But yeah, I'm in agreement with Tom. Allow Accessories for Less, talk it through with them. If they say, this is just becoming a situation where we're not going to be able to make you happy with it, there is the choice of keeping what you have in hand. You do have a 1-year warranty with Denon. They will accept that, you send it to one of their authorized repair centers, and they will do whatever they're able to do with it. I sort of, at this point, lean to, if Accessories for Less can't make it right, I would probably kind of just get a full refund and be on my way and shop elsewhere. That's just a personal leaning that I would take, because it's a lot of time and shipping that you're dealing with otherwise.
Right. Kev heard us talking about the 2.5 millimeter ports in the back of the Harmony hub and how you could use a 2.5 to 3.5 millimeter mono cable to plug directly into the 3.5 millimeter IR input on, say, the back of an AV receiver. So he gave it a try and it worked perfectly.
Yay!
So now he is wondering, could he use the 3.5 millimeter Y splitters to connect 3 devices this way, or is there such a thing as a 2.5 millimeter to multiple 3.5 millimeter cable adapter? Will it work? Since Logitech's own precision IR cables for the Harmony hub feed 4, since they feed 4 precision IR transmitters from a single 2.5 millimeter connection, feeding 3 or 4 3.5 millimeter connections should work work the same, correct? Or is this different? Yeah, it should. I don't see why it wouldn't work.
Yeah,
I mean, there might be some signal loss as you split it this many times, but I don't think that it's gonna lose that much signal. I couldn't imagine that would be the case.
The signal that is coming out of that 2.5 millimeter port on the back of the Harmony hub, it's the same at all times. So the signal coming out is always the same. Now that could either go to the included little mini blaster, which will blast out infrared light all over the place, or it could go to the precision cables, which give you 4 teeny tiny little transmitters that are, as the name implies, more precise and aren't blasting the infrared light everywhere, but they're still emitting infrared light from 4 little heads. Or you could connect it to a 3.5 millimeter cable, and the exact same signal is being sent through that. So functionally, should be no problem connecting some 3.5 millimeter Y splitters to give you the number that you want. Yeah, every time you split it, it might be weakening the signal a little bit, so I don't think you could do it ad infinitum. But I think 1 or 2 Y splitters shouldn't be a problem. I wouldn't anticipate it being a problem. Yeah. I'm not aware of like a Hydra-headed cable that does that. There certainly are Y splitters though, so I think it's certainly worth a try. I wouldn't discourage you from trying it. It should work.
Yeah. JR's basement room is about 24 feet long by 14.5 feet wide. He sits about 13 feet from his front wall, and then the 11 feet behind him is used as a home office plus a treadmill. The back 11 feet has a low 6'9" ceiling, and the front 13 feet that comprises his theater has a 7'9" ceiling. He bought a used 5.1 set of B&W speakers. 2-channel music is a big priority for him, so he spent a lot of time optimizing and positioning his front left and right speakers and his seats. His front towers ended up, that's why he sits for 13 feet back, because
from the front wall.
From the front, because the front wall is 14.5 feet wide. He's going for the golden triangle thing. His front towers end up farther into the room than his old setup, and his seats are farther back now too. He still has his old surround back speakers mounted to where the ceiling drops down 1 foot for the back of the room, but now that puts them basically right above his seats. The stairs are going up in the front left corner, and the front home theater area of the room is just a bit wider on the left than the back office, home office part.
It's a very slightly L shape, but effectively a long rectangle for more or less.
So when you're facing the screen, there's stairs going on that same wall up to the left.
Correct.
Okay, out of the room. I kind of thought of them going back or whatever, but yes. Okay. So he's got some acoustic foam up on the ceiling and maybe on the walls in a couple of places.
Yep.
He's got tower speakers that are quite wide, a lot of gear up front too I can't really see. And then his surround speakers are in front of him.
Yeah, because they seem to be where he used to sit. It looks like he kept the same positions for his surrounds, but now his seat is farther back than it once was.
Right. And that's almost certainly... No, it's not.
I don't know what you were thinking.
I was looking at the last picture on the right, and there's a door. I thought maybe that door might have something to do with it, but it actually, he could still move it back. So then he's got some speakers on his ceiling, too, above?
Yeah, those used to be his surround backs. I mean, they still are his surround backs, but because...
But they're in front of him now?
Well, because he's moved his seat back, they're basically right above him. They're like straight up from his seat now that his seat's further back.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Diagram as well if you're watching on YouTube to give an overhead aerial view of the whole layout.
Right. Okay. So he says a B&W subwoofer is a beast compared to his old sub, but it still isn't up to snuff for the really deep, loud bass in his movie and games. He's had it distort and bottom out, even though it sounds great for 2.1 music listening. He did a subwoofer crawl to find its correct location. He doesn't have a lot of placement options, and the front right corner resulted in large dips and peaks. So he's looking for a subwoofer upgrade. What should he get? 1 sub or 2, ported or sealed, SVS 2000 or 3000 series? ?
Is there a door at the top of those stairs? Is one question, because that makes a big old difference. Because if you got wide open stairs that go up top, then you're dealing with the entire volume of air of whatever's at the top of those stairs.
So, looking a little bit at this room here, his surround backs are directly above his head. His surrounds are in front of him, about maybe 1.5 feet or 2 feet. His first sub, or his only sub, is directly to his left.
Correct.
In front of in front of him and to his left are French doors into, I guess, a closet, and then all at the front of the room, like I said before, there's stairs going up and to the left.
Mhm.
Then his speakers are up at the front, and then he says he's got space in the front right corner for a second sub, but he's got a bookshelf all along the right wall.
Except
So
for
right
the front
wall,
corner. Yeah.
except for that front
Yeah.
corner. So what he has done, it looks like, is he has placed his surround speaker on a stand. The bookshelves actually look like they might have glass doors on them.
Some of them do, not all of them, it looks
Yeah.
like. Yeah.
And he's got a foam board, or a board with foam on it that he looks like he stood up kind of not quite behind it, but maybe it used to be behind it.
Yeah.
Behind the right surround. So clearly he's okay with having something there.
Correct.
So what would I do? What I would do is I would, looking at your little diagram here, I would swap the sub and the surround left speaker
Mm-hmm.
so that the surround speaker is in the more correct place. I would then, across the room for that, where your current surround is, I would put that second sub there.
So they're pretty close to being the midpoints of the side
Yeah.
walls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you cannot do that, or you do not want to do that for whatever reasons, and then I would relabel your surround back speakers as top middles.
Well, that's coming up.
Go-
That's coming up later.
Going
So
on with
for
your
the
life.
moment, let's deal with the subs.
So I would take, and let me see if I can see that. There's no picture of it. So in his diagram, oh yeah, there's a guitar there. There is a gap between the bookshelf and the home office desk,
Mm-hmm.
but on his back, far behind him and to the right. I would put one sub there.
Oh, okay. If
And
the
second
mid-wall
sub,
placement can't work because of the bookcase.
or under, is that a desk back there? It is a desk back there.
Yeah, there's a desk in the rear right corner, a treadmill in the rear left corner of the whole
Right.
space.
So your options, then, if you can put it right where that lamp is, right as close to that desk as possible, and then you put your other one, your left sub, between the stairs and the French doors where that little table is.
Oh, okay.
That's an option. And then lastly, front right corner, back left corner, and whatever that thing is in the back left corner, which is near the treadmill,
Mhm.
but in the corner there, it looks like guitar cases.
Yeah.
I would move those anywhere else and then put the second sub there.
Now, I mean, I'm going to, unusually for me, question a little bit if dual subs are completely necessary, because if you really only care about one seat, and
Right.
you found a good location for one sub for that one seat, and we are dealing with not an enclosed space. I don't know if there's a door at the top of those stairs or not. If all of those things are true, then you don't necessarily have to go for dual subs.
That's true.
If you care about the response being uniform across all three of your seats, then I'm going to highly encourage that you try to get dual subs. And all of the dual placement options that Tom just listed are very good ideas. I think a cylinder makes a whole lot of sense in here. It takes up less floor space. It will come with the anti-vibration SoundPath feet already on it. And, if you were considering, like, he does have walkways on either side of his couch, right, to get to the back of his room. But even if you have, you have to brush by on the right-hand side next to your bookcase, a cylinder sub, they're round and soft, and brushing by that is no problem. It's not a tripping hazard. It's not going to poke into anybody. So I like cylinder subs here. I think a pair of PC 2000 Pro cylinders, even if you have some open space at the top of those stairs, I mean, they might not be able to pressurize your whole darn house down at 20 hertz, but they're never going to break themselves because they've got the DSP protection from SVS. So I think a couple of PC 2000 cylinder subs would be a great choice here. When you're ordering them, it is actually possible to run them sealed. So if you're all like worried about sealed versus ported for music, we'll say you don't have to. But if you want the option, SVS will include at no charge a massive port plug, because the port on that PC2000 Pro is enormous, but they have a foam port plug for it. And in the app, you can switch it to sealed configuration so that the amplifier works properly with the port sealed. And you can try it both ported and sealed. So I see no downside to that. I'd go for a cylinder.
So my fear here is that he's asking us to suggest a second sub instead of a replacement for his B&W. Is that
he's asking for a replacement.
Okay, yeah, okay, good. Because if you are, and for everybody else, if you've got a sub that is not holding it together in your room, adding a second sub is not going to fix it.
No,
it's
he was looking for a subwoofer upgrade.
Yeah. Good. I agree with Rob. I always love cylinders, though, so it's hard for me to not suggest those. So as mentioned, 2-channel music is a high priority for him, and he's very happy with his front, left, and right speakers and seating setup now after really taking the time to optimize that. So all of the other speaker placements need to work around that if possible. He used to have his seats farther forward, but now that's changed. Furthermore, he's a gamer. He definitely plans on getting a PS5, although he probably won't get an Xbox Series X. So he's planning a TV and receiver upgrade, and that will bring along the chance to expand to Atmos. He's thinking Denon, especially only having a single an HDMI 2.1 input, but if he's only getting one of the new game systems, that should be okay, correct? So then his main question is about speaker placement for Atmos. First of all, let's answer that. No, get a Yamaha.
Well, we're going to have to wait to make sure that, one that has more than 7 channels is available. We're definitely expecting it to be the case.
Yeah.
It's, so, I mean, I'm going to say wait until you have the game system in hand.
Right.
If you are at all okay with the idea of plugging a game system directly into a TV, because he's planning to get a whole new TV that can do the whole 4K 120 thing.
And he has a flat screen up front, so it's not like we're worried about a projector.
Yeah, he's got a flat screen up front. Now, I mean, he's done a pretty clean wall-mounted setup, but he's got at least one cable hanging down from it, plus the power cable. So if you're okay with potentially plugging in your source directly to the TV, then eARC will be fine for an additional HDMI 2.1 source, if you ever even get one. If you're really only planning on one, then, I mean, the Denon X are okay for passing that through. It's just at some point you're probably going to have another HDMI 2.1 source in the future, so that will necessitate either plugging it directly into the TV and relying on eARC or upgrading your receiver at that time. But assuming that, yes, Yamaha's Avantage receivers come out fairly soon in this year and can do 9 or 11 speakers, 9 is what we're going to be recommending to you, spoiler alert, then yeah, that might be worth a consideration at that point. I will say wait until you actually have the PS5 in hand, because your AV receiver options will be greater at that point.
So his main question is about speaker placement for Atmos. He actually has 2 pairs of Polk in-ceiling speakers on hand that he wound up getting for free. But he has a lot of obstructions above his basement ceiling, so installing them would be a big challenge, and he probably wouldn't want to tackle it himself. Even though he has access above his ceilings via a crawl space, he opted to use a cable raceway to run his surround back speaker wire, since it's such a maze of obstacles above his ceiling. So what do we think it should do for the full next-gen Atmos gaming experience? What speakers should he use, and where should he put them? So no matter how much room you have behind you, I don't really think that you should have surround backs.
Nope.
I don't think so.
I'm actually in agreement with this. I mean, I was even thinking, because Tom already mentioned of possibly just swapping the positions of your surround left and subwoofer, but I was actually thinking, can we move the surrounds even farther back, into what is technically the space of your home office there, but right, actually have them even a little bit farther back so that they're, just a little ways behind you for your surrounds. I would eliminate surround backs. And since you already have a cable raceway run to that part of the ceiling that's right above you with your current, what you're labeling as surround backs, I'm highly considering getting some prime elevations, some SVS prime elevations, having top middles mounted to your ceiling, so that they're angled straight down at you, and then some front height speakers on your front wall, which again, you already have a cable raceway going up your front wall. Just extend that out to the sides and have some front heights up on your front wall. I would kind of come at it that way with prime elevations, and I would sell those Polk in-ceiling speakers that you got for free. So that'll only just go towards your prime elevations. And I'd have them labeled as front heights and top middles, just like Tom has.
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons that he didn't have the speakers and the subs, behind him more is because the room bumps in right behind his couch. So that would change the physical distance between from where he sits to the surround left would be shorter than where he sits to the surround right.
Sure.
Don't worry about that.
No.
The receiver will take care of that. It's just a trim level thing, so don't worry about that. And yes, in buying a receiver, you should wait until you absolutely need it, because the longer you wait, the more chance you have of getting something that you actually need.
So you'll end up with a 9 speakers total, a 5.2.4 configuration.
Yeah. All right, we only have one question left, so I guess we're going to do it. Kenneth has a room in his basement that he can turn into a dedicated home theater. It's roughly 14 by 21, but it's not not a perfect rectangle. There's a small jut out for some doors, plus a stairway. There's a wide soffit going across one wall and one window.
It's pretty close to rectangular, though.
Just these pictures are just atrociously hard.
Well,
to
it was taken.
If you haven't been in this room, they're all the same. The wall. There's nothing in the room but carpet. And
it was captured from a video, so let's consider the first photo where you're seeing the doors that are in the little jut out. Let's call that the rear left corner. So as we're coming along, we're looking along what will be the left wall, and then the front wall, which is what has the window, and then going into the front right corner along the right wall where we can see the soffit that's overhead along what would be the back wall, and then there's another little jut out in what would be the rear right corner, which is where the stairway is and what looks like the entrance door into this basement.
This is almost exactly the same setup, except for the stairway and the placement of the door, as my theater.
Okay.
My theater, I have a soffit in the back that houses the AC ducting.
Sure. So, I mean, for Kenneth, the way I just described it is, I think, what makes sense for the layout of this room. That would make the room about 14 feet wide and about 21 feet long. You'd have all the door and stairway stuff would be your back wall. The soffit for the room would be on your back wall, and you would be facing where the window is right now. But, I mean, hey, we can put curtains across that window or something like that and have either a projection or a nice big flat screen in front of where the window is right now with a curtain covering up that window. That's my idea of how I would lay out this room.
So he's new to having a whole room to work with. So where should he even start in terms of preparing this room to turn into a theater? What should he consider in terms of soundproofing? Should he repaint? Rob will tell you to paint the whole thing black, but Rob's a crazy person. So,
I mean, if you were going to do a projector, which, I mean, at only 21 feet long, I mean, it's conceivable you could have 2 rows of seats. I probably wouldn't.
Your second row will be on the back wall. I will tell you that because that's where my second row is.
Right, yeah. Or darn close to it, and you have the soffit coming down overhead, so having a second row and a riser or something like that would be a challenge. I would probably have myself, I mean, if I had my druthers, I might be about 12 or 13 feet from the front wall. At that distance, having a projection screen would be really nice. So if you were going to have a projection screen set up in here, which is feasible, particularly if you're only going to have 1 row of seats, then, completely blacking out the room is not out of the question, or at least going for a nice, very close to matte dark gray, which could be fashionable. But before we get to finishing and painting this room, if you want to tackle soundproofing at all, which is a
completely different thing.
Very different subject so we're not talking about acoustic treatment. We're not talking about panels on your walls to reduce echoes and slap reflections. Soundproofing, meaning sound not getting into this room or out of this room, would require construction. So what I would maybe recommend, since we know that he already has in his second question there. He already has equipment on hand. It's not as though he doesn't have any speakers or subwoofers or anything. I would bring at least a pair of speakers and your sub into this room. Myself, I would just play a big sweep on repeat. I would just have a frequency sweep playing on repeat. I'd turn it up nice and loud, and then I'd go out of this room and see how much I can hear coming out of this room and whether or not that amount of sound leakage is acceptable. We do have stairs in this room, so I don't know if there are stairs at the top or a door at the top of those stairs to close this off, or if that's wide open. If it's wide open, if there's any way to install a door at the top of these stairs, that's number one. I mean, that'll take care of probably most of your issues. If there is no door, install a door. But once you have a door, how much sound is leaking out of there will tell you whether or not you're going to want to do soundproofing. If you do, like, that's a whole room renovation. That is nothing trivial. Right. That's not something you can just slap up on the walls. So it would be good to determine that before we worry about any of the finishing or painting or how wires are going to run or any of that stuff.
Right. And that's the number one thing you want to do.
Yeah.
As far as soundproofing, it's just decide whether or not you even want to tackle that.
Yeah.
I think from my experience, and it depends really where your bedrooms are in location in proximity to this room.
Sure.
I would consider putting a solid core door on, because I'm considering doing that on my home theater right now. I would decide with my wife or significant other or whomever else would be affected by this, what type of speaker setup or what sort of viewing setup you're going to have. If you're going to do a projector, if you're going to do in ceiling, in wall, in something speakers, the worst mistake people make is they say, I've got a big blank wall here, I'm going to put the TV right here, I'll put the speakers on either side, and I'm going to sink them in the wall. And then they just walk away like that's just going to be a thing that's going to happen. You're going to learn very quickly that studs are a thing, and they are never placed where you want them to be. So you will have to make a decision, and do your research and find out. Then, after you have your plan, then you decide, am I running wires in the wall? Am I running them in the ceiling? Am I going to do all that stuff? Am I doing it myself? Am I paying somebody else to do it? How much is it worth to me? Because, to me, the biggest problem of having a projector is not the screen. It's not the placement of the projector. It's getting the stupid wire and power back to the projector. That ends up being the hardest part, because like with me, what I did basically is I built a shelf off of my soffit. So the shelf is connected to the soffit, and the bottom of the shelf is flush to well, actually it overlaps the bottom of the soffit there, and that is where I put my projector. Well, then I had to install power up there. I had to run a box for the cables and stuff like that. And then because my room was all open, I was able to run that into the walls, no problem. But you're not going to be in that situation. You've got what looks to be a brand new room in a brand new house. So are you going to start opening up walls? Are you going to, do you have attic access here? These are all things to consider. So it becomes everything becomes a lot easier once you've decided where you're going to put, what kind of setup you're going to have, and where you're going to put it. Then you can start doing your research and finding out how much is it going to cost to get it all installed, how much of it can I do myself, all these other things. And yes, I would go, structural changes, run wires, paint, and then starting to install gear at that point.
I mean, the other thing I don't want him to worry about is, I immediately jumped to the idea of sitting like 12 or 13 feet away or having a projector, but by no means is that necessary. I mean, we have very reasonable, affordable 85-inch flat panels now. Now, personally, I wouldn't want to sit as much as 12 or 13 away from an 85-inch, but something like 9 or 10 feet away from an 85-inch would be very acceptable to me as a theater experience. And On top of that, it's not as though a flat panel must be mounted to the physical wall. We have wonderful 3-in-1 TV stands that still have a wall-type mount, but it's a free-form stand where you can position the TV anywhere you want in front of that window space that you have at the front of this room. So it could be very reasonable to have a large flat panel set up in here, which then might allow you to have 2 rows of seats if you really want it, even with both rows of seats off of the back wall. You could have 1 row of seats at, say, 10 feet from the physical front wall, and then a nice 3-in-1 TV stand that puts the TV 9 or 8.5 feet away from the front row, and then a second row that's at like 16 or 17 feet from the front wall. Leaving you a nice 4 feet to the back wall. That could be a very reasonable setup in here with a flat panel. And if you then have a flat panel, well, now I'm not worried at all about repainting this room to a darker color. That can open up a lot of possibilities. It's sort of a matter of how far away would you like to sit from the screen? That's going to determine your ideal screen size. But there are certainly reasonable solutions with a nice big 85-inch flat panel that are pretty darn affordable these days.
Right. So currently he owns a Denon X4400H receiver with a 5.1.2 clips reference Premiere speaker setup, 4 bookshelf speakers, center, and 2 Atmos modules. Should he be looking to expand or change that setup? Yeah.
Expand? I don't see any reason why he needs to change the speakers.
Right. I mean, 5.1.2, first of all, it needs to be 5.2 point something else.
Sure.
And I would go 5.2.4.
Sure.
So there's no reason not to do that. You've got your own room. Now you've got the Atmos modules.
Yeah,
Are those the ones that you can mount those, right?
You can do all kinds of things with those Klipsch Atmos modules. I really like them because they have a physical switch on them, so that you can either have the Dolby head-related transfer function equalization thing that is meant for when they're firing up at the ceiling, or you can flick the switch and they become regular direct radiating speakers that have a wedge shape and are easily mounted to any wall, at which point you can use them as surrounds or surround backs, or you can mount them high up and have them as heights or even overheads. So I really like those Klipsch Atmos modules. I would easily be happy getting another pair or even 2 pairs. You could expand this all the way to a 7.2.4 configuration as long as you have some decent space from your seats to the back wall, which there's no reason you can't with a 21-foot long room. I would certainly be happy to expand this to a full 11 speaker and 2 subwoofer setup. That would necessitate getting a new AV receiver because your 1500 tops out at 7 speakers max. But I see no reason to change the type of speakers that you already have, and you can definitely get more Klipsch reference Premiere speakers to match what
if you're happy with them. I mean, if you've decided that you want new speakers, then we're not going to say, oh no, you got to stick with these. These are great. These are fine speakers, and if you're happy with them, just get more of them.
Yeah,
there you go. All right, so that's it for this week.
I believe so.
We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Kevin and Jefferson for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, giving us PayPal donations, as well as our 122 patrons over at patreon.com.
For sure. Kevin and Jefferson, thank you so much for coming to avrant.com and clicking on the PayPal link, giving us a donation that way. And big thanks to our 122 patrons over at patreon.com/avrantpodcast.
I want to thank Tom for talking us up to Safe and Sound HQ, and Joseph for reaching out to me and then offering to send me some good seasonings dressing packets because apparently Florida doesn't deserve them anymore.
Yes, Tom, thank you for talking us up to Safe and Sound HQ. We'll keep that in mind for people who are looking for refurbished NAD electronics products. And Joseph, thank you for thinking of Tom and reaching out to him with those good seasons packets.
And lastly, thank you for Curt and RD for thanking us for keeping this podcast going.
Indeed. Very nice to get those notes of gratitude from Curt and RD. We do appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who continues to listen and for sending in your questions to question@avrant.com. That's our email. That's the way to get on the show, question@avrant.com. Thank you so much, everybody, for continuing to keep AVRant community going.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.